Governor, you got a second? Governor, I live here, Governor. That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
I'm sorry. There's literally, I've tried 5 times. That's why I'm walking around to make the call.
Why is the president not taking your call?
Because it's not going through. So
Why?
I have to get cell service.
So let's get it. Let's get it. I want to be here when you call the president.
I appreciate it. I'm doing that right now. And it's to immediately get reimbursements, individual assistance, and to help you. I'm devastated for you. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. I have 4 kids. Losing the school.
Everyone who went to school there, they lost their homes. They lost 2 homes because they were living in one and building another. Governor, please tell me, what are you going to do with the president right now?
We're getting the resources to help rebuild.
Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor?
That's all literally.
Is it going to be different next time?
It has to be. Has to be. Of course.
What are you going to do?
I'm doing
to
everything
fill the hydrants. I would fill them up personally, you know that.
I literally have.
I would fill up the hydrants myself.
I understand.
But would you do that?
I would do whatever I can.
But you're not. I see do you know there's water dripping over there, Governor? There's water coming out there. You can use it.
I appreciate it. I'm going to make the call to address everything I can right now, including making sure people are safe.
I'd like to make sure you do. Can I have an opportunity to at least tell people you're doing what you're saying you're doing? Could somebody have a contact? Can I have your contact information?
Right there.
It was the video that Gruesome Newsom hoped you would never see. And of course, that means it went viral. Everyone's seen it. And it is all but guaranteed the end of Gavin Newsom's pathetic and failed political career.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President, thank you. Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So good. Welcome back.
Gang, what you just saw there was both the president and the vice president eerily congratulating Trump and promising a peaceful transition of power. Well, that's something I'd like to believe, but it's hard to believe those words when they're coming from the mouths of pure serial liars. I mean, career liars. So what does that mean for the next few months? The opposite of what they're promising. So absolute chaos, economically, culturally, politically. We might be in for war for all we know. So what should you do? You should at least own some gold. The markets might be up right now, but who knows what's going to happen between now and January. You need to protect yourself against the last hurrah of the worst administration America has ever had. We know it's coming. I don't know what, but something is between now and January 20th. You might think they're just going to hand over a pristine, happy, functioning country to the man they tried to assassinate and put in jail, entirely ruin. No, something's coming, and you need to be financially prepared for it. You need to talk to Goldco and protect yourself against this last battle. Get some gold in your portfolio. In the coming months, you'll be glad that you did. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code and just chat with them. You'll be glad that you did. So unfortunately, on to California, which of course is not so beautiful. Victor Davis Hanson, one of my favorite scholars, had a great analysis of the fires. Hanson's a California native, and he said that these fires are in many ways akin to a Green New Deal DEI hydrogen bomb. Take a look.
So it was a total systems collapse from the idea of not spending money on irrigation, storage, water, fire prevention, and forest management, a viable insurance industry, a DEI hierarchy. You put it all together, and it's something like a DEI, Green New Deal, hydrogen bomb. Gavin Newsom was fiddling. He's almost Nero Newsom. And this has been something that is just unimaginable, this systems breakdown. And to finish, what we're seeing in California is a state with 40 million people. And yet the people who run it feel that it should return to a 19th century pastoral condition. They are de-civilizing the state and de-industrializing the state and de-farming the state, but they're not telling the 40 million people that their lifestyles will have to revert back to the 19th century when you had no protection from fire, you didn't have enough water in California, you didn't have enough power, you didn't pump oil. So we are deliberately making these decisions not to develop energy, not to develop a timber industry, not to protect the insurance industry, not to protect houses and property. And we're doing it in almost a purely nihilistic fashion. And Karen Bass should resign. She came to the airport back from Africa. She had nothing to say. She was confronted at the airport. Why were you in Africa? Why did you cut the fire department? They cut the fire department by almost $18 million. They gave fire protective equipment to Ukraine's first responders. And she had nothing to say. She had nothing to say because she couldn't say anything. I don't want to be too pessimistic or bleak tonight, but this is one of the most alarming symptoms of a society gone mad. And if this continues, and if this were to spread to other states, we would become a third world country if we're not in parts already.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant analysis. An alarming system of a society gone mad. It's a total systems collapse from the idea of not spending money on irrigation or water storage or building and filling reservoirs. Again, California hasn't built a freaking reservoir since 1979. Did you know that? What the hell is that? What the hell is that? How is it that California hasn't built a single reservoir since 1979? They've completely neglected forest management. The insurance industry has basically fled California, and it's ultimately because of a DEI hierarchy ideologically committed to the Green New Deal, and you put all that together and you get something like you talked about, something akin to a DEI Green New Deal hydrogen bomb that just exploded. There were two takeaways here that I think really stand out for me, and that's the insidiousness of hyper-inclusion and hyper incompetence. So, in many respects, you can actually summarize wokeness as a combination of insidious inclusion and insidious incompetence. So, one of the questions that's getting asked over and over again is why? Why are woke environmentalists more concerned about a freaking fish than they are people? And there's actually an explanation for that. There is a rationale, a twisted, frankly, satanic rationale that gives them a sense of moral superiority in siding with a fish over people. Now, if you don't know, what we're talking about here, of course, is what's called the Delta smelt, okay? I don't know why fish always have the worst names, but it's called the Delta smelt. It's a small, slender-bodied fish in California's San Francisco estuary, which is a mixture of seawater and river water. So it's a body of water that has connections to both the rivers and the open sea, okay? The Delta smelt is listed as an endangered species under state and federal laws. And the key here is part of our officials' interpretation of that endangeredness is that it's considered an indicator species for the health of the estuary ecosystem as a whole. So in other words, if the Delta smelt is dying, the estuary is dying. Okay, so that's what environmentalists are freaking out over in their own minds, as it were. And so among the efforts at protecting this fish, California officials have been limiting water diversion from Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta, and making sure that water, and again, this is key, that land water, that river mountain water, instead of being allocated to places like LA or Central Valley farmers, that fresh water is channeled into San Francisco estuary, which in effect means it's being basically washed out to sea, because that's what an estuary is. It has connections to both rivers and the sea, the saltwater sea. Now, again, this is all in the name of supposedly protecting this fish, because this fish is an indicator of the health of the environment. Now, what's so interesting is that this sets the stage for a showdown. And this is what wokeness basically is. Wokeness always takes a predictable side in this kind of showdown. It's a showdown between two, what many believe to be liberal values: fairness on the one hand and inclusion on the other. Fairness versus inclusion. We have the issue of fairness, where Californian taxpayers rightly expect the appropriate allocation of water resources spread throughout the state so as to ensure that their houses don't burn down. Seems reasonable enough, right? Those officials that have been put in charge of water resources are expected to responsibly and fairly distribute said water resources for the benefit, particularly of homeowners in the case of fire. So that would be the value of fairness. But you'll note, and this is very important for all of us to kind of make a mental note of, write this down. Fairness often clashes with the other liberal value of inclusion. And that's because fairness often requires certain populations to be excluded. Now, in sports, that's easy, right? You see it all the time. In order for a boxing match to be fair, a heavyweight can't be allowed to fight a lightweight. Simple, right? The problem here is that wokeness as an ideology sanctifies inclusion. You have to get that. That'll help you at least understand why wokeness comes across as so utterly insane. Wokeness sanctifies inclusion. Specifically, wokeness sanctifies the victim. The oppressed, the supposed oppressed, literally is considered, the oppressed literally has inviolable sacred identity. And they're committed, the woke are committed to ripping apart any system that disenfranchises the victimized and the oppressed, that excludes against them. So what you have to get here is that this sanctification of inclusion means that the woke will always side with the perceived victim of oppression over the supposed oppressor and the oppressor's systems of oppression. And that includes endangered species. Endangered species are victims. They're being oppressed, like the Delta smelt. And so what we're seeing in these tragic, horrific Inferno scenes is the result of what happens when you prioritize inclusion over fairness. What we are seeing is what happens when you prioritize inclusion over fairness. Again, we're seeing it most explicitly in the realm of sport. The issue of trans athletes competing in female sports ultimately involves precisely this clash between these two liberal values of fairness and inclusion. And again, what's key in sports is that its commitment to fairness, its traditional commitment to fairness, has always involved some kind of exclusion. Men's basketball teams exclude playing female basketball teams. Lightweights exclude fighting super heavyweights. Professional sports excludes minor league. We could go on and on and on. Fairness always involves some kind of exclusion. That's part of what makes it fair. But again, because the woke always by definition side with the value of inclusion, then if you allow the woke to take over sports, what happens? What happens? Ask Riley Gaines. What happens? Sports competition implodes. It literally goes up in flames. Prioritizing inclusion ends up actually undermining the foundational rationale for all legitimate sport competition, which is fairness. Without fairness, you don't have legitimate sports competition. You have a play. Maybe Ketanji Jackson can go and star in it. It's already been pre-scripted. Now, again, that's fine. You can have it. You want to go to the WWE? I took my boys to the WWE live in Philly all the time when they were younger. It's fun. It's like, what do you want to even call it? It's kind of like a, redneck Shakespeare kind of thing, or redneck operas. I don't know. It's great. Families, you name it. That's fine. But it's not in the traditional sense sport. Fairness is intrinsic. It is inherent to legitimate sports competition, whereas inclusion is not. Exclusion is a necessary component to fairness. You are all blessed by the fact that I've been excluded from the NBA. I promise you that. If you don't have fairness, you have destroyed the entire rationale of sports competition. And as it turns out, if you don't have fairness in society, right? We're seeing it in the UK right now. We're seeing it in the UK with the mass gang rape scandal that's blowing the roof off of the UK government. Both major parties, center right, center left, Tories and Labour, both were involved in covering up a mass rape scandal that one report said, I've did a deep dive on this in one of our videos this week. One report says that could have affected upwards of 1 million British girls, some as young as 12 and 13 over the course of 30 years. Feminism versus multiculturalism, right? Feminism is going to involve exclusion. We exclude cultures from coming in that don't honor women. But that would be wrong because those are victim cultures. Those are oppressed cultures. So we side on the side of inclusion. What happens? So if you don't have, just as sports collapses, what happens to society? If you don't have, in this case, in California, if you don't have a responsible, fair distribution of water, then your society burns. The truest words Trump ever spoke is everything woke turns to shit. And he is not in the least bit exaggerating. So that's the first of these two insidious patterns here, this insidiousness of hyper-inclusion. But then you also have the insidiousness of incompetence. And thank God, this is ultimately what's going to bring wokeness down and collapse into the ash heap of history where it belongs. But boy, as we can see, does it cause a lot of damage on the way down. The insidiousness of incompetence is where bio-Leninism comes in. We talked about this in a video yesterday. Bio-Leninism is the notion that cultural Marxists inevitably promote. Again, you want to write this down. It's a great term. Bio-Leninism. Cultural Marxists inevitably promote the least qualified people into positions of leadership and thereby guarantee their own incompetence, crisis, and demise. So whereas traditional Leninism, Soviet Leninism, promoted adherence through the ranks by virtue of their ideological fidelity to Marxism, Bio-Leninism, rooted in identity politics and checking off the right boxes, promotes its members not on the basis of competence or even ideological conformity, but instead on the basis of one's identity and the resemblance one has to these victim classes, right? So that they are included. So modern progressives, devotees of identity politics, promote their members through their ranks not on the basis of competence, but on the basis of checking all the right identity boxes. And so, with competence no longer part of the screening process for promotion, inevitably those who are least qualified for a leadership position, those who would never succeed in a meritocratic society, end up getting put into positions of leadership. So Bio-Leninism explains why the progressive left is so consistently and horrifically incompetent. It's because it places into leadership positions those who are the least qualified to lead. So the irony is that wokeness not only destroys everything it touches, its own inherent incompetency crisis guarantees that wokeness ultimately destroys itself. And I think that's what we're seeing in California. And I think that is what Gavin Newsom is discovering the hard way. I do not think there is any coming back for Gavin after this. Especially after that video with that pleading mom. He has crushed any chance of even coming close to winning Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada. I mean, he's lost the blue-collar working class vote to J.D. Vance of Ohio, like hands down, especially in the so-called blue wall.